What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be talking about Peter Pan and Wendy. Written and directed by David Lowery, who wrote this film alongside Toby Halbrooks. This film stars people like Alexander Molony, Ever Anderson, Jude Law, Jim Gaffigan, Jacoby Jupe, and many more. Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome to my review of the latest Disney live-action remake, reimagining, whatever you want to call them. And to be completely honest, I intended wholeheartedly on getting this review out for you guys a lot sooner, but I won't lie. I'm 20 hours deep into the new Star Wars game, Jedi Survivor, and I've been having a blast with that, so this Disney remake had to take a back seat for the last few days. But I wanted to take some time apart from that really quickly to watch a movie, get a video up, and get back to gaming. Peter Pan and Wendy is the latest live-action version of Peter Pan, and I think I can speak for a lot of us when I say that I don't really know if we need any more Peter Pan movies at this point. Whether it's live action, whether it's animated, whether it's a spin-off like the Tinkerbell movies, whether it's done by Disney, whether it's done by somebody else, it doesn't matter. We have so many Peter Pan movies, and just in the last 2 decades, we've had a couple of live-action Peter Pan films. So when it comes to Peter Pan, I think that we've definitely had our fill. And so, I still went into this with a bit of positivity. If you guys have been following the channel for a while, I'm a huge fan of Disney. I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s, and I love the old school Disney films. I grew up with the Renaissance era, from The Little Mermaid all the way to Tarzan. And I have been an advocate here on the channel for a lot of the Disney live action remakes. I enjoyed things like Maleficent when that originally came out, and Cinderella, The Jungle Book, even The Lion King, and a lot of others that have gotten a lot of crap. And while not all of them have been fantastic, and most of them are in no way, shape, or form even touch the success and the greatness of the original films, except for maybe The Jungle Book in my opinion, I've still enjoyed them. However, I have noticed that since they started making some straight for Disney Plus, not ones that, start in theaters and end up going to Disney Plus, the ones that are going straight to Disney Plus, I have noticed a bit of a dip in quality, having them feel far more like TV movies, of course with a higher budget compared to what TV movies used to be. And, I enjoyed the Lady and the Tramp remake that they made. It's not as timeless as that original film, but I enjoyed it. But then we got Pinocchio last year, which I wasn't a huge fan of. I was pretty let down by that. And then now we have Peter Pan and Wendy, which I'll start this off completely honest in saying that I just found to be a middle of the road film altogether. The director and writer of this film, or one of the writers, is David Lowery, as I mentioned, who also directed a film a couple of years ago for A24 known as The Green Knight. And one of the things I really enjoyed about this film right out of the gate was the film's style, and I think that this director definitely has a good vision just visually when it comes to the stories and the movies that he makes. And I really want to praise the cinematography of this film. I want to praise the overall look and feel. There are some really great shots throughout the course of this film, some long takes that I thought I was really kind of pulled into the world with, and there were moments throughout the course of the film where I just kept looking at the way that the film looked, the use of locations, and just the special effects that kept me engrossed with the film more so than the actual story. And when it comes to the story, it's something that we're all familiar with, right? Peter Pan in this story with Wendy and the Lost Boys and Tiger Lily and Captain Hook. It's not something that's brand new to us film goers, again, as I mentioned, because for decades and decades we've had various iterations of the story, sometimes doing something completely different like the story Hook with Robin Williams, or just doing something that's a little bit more conventional like the one that came out in the early 2000s. Overall, there's been an abundance of films for this franchise, for this story. And so when it comes to this one, what can they really do that's all that new, Unfortunately, not a whole lot, as I found this film to be just okay. When the movie was over, I didn't hate it, I didn't even really dislike it, I just kind of had a bit of a reaction to it. Overall, I think the film is well shot, the performances for the most part are pretty solid, there are some positives I definitely have, I wasn't bored while watching it, and I thought that the runtime breezed by pretty quickly. However, I never really felt that whimsy and that magic that you want to feel when it comes to the story of Peter Pan. The whole journey, when you go back to the original film or many of the other iterations, is these other characters being brought to Neverland in this magical world and believing in their ability to fly and the happy thoughts and the pixie dust and all this different stuff that brings magic to this story. And unfortunately, this just felt like a far more stiff rendition of the story that was kind of breezing by, really developing this iteration of these characters and this iteration of Neverland and this iteration of the story, and instead was just kind of trying to showcase those moments from the original film that we all know and love. However, it just never really landed for me. Part of my enjoyment of these live action remakes has been not really ever looking for it to be better than the original film, but more so just being able to see a different iteration of moments that I really have come to love over the course of my life. And a lot of times there are really cool different versions of these sequences that I enjoy from the animated films in their own way that are able to be brought to live actions, a lot of times in a far more cinematic way because of where we are today with filmmaking. And in the case of Peter Pan and Wendy, it just never really gave me a lot of that. There was a lot of sequences I recognized from the original movie, but there wasn't ever anything that really made me feel that whimsy and magic. Now, I'd be lying if there wasn't at least a couple of moments where I felt a little bit of magic. There are a couple of moments throughout the course of the film, but in a nearly 2-hour film, I think this film comes in almost at an hour and 50 minutes, it just never really had a lot of moments where I felt myself feeling emotionally connected or really all that invested in everything that was going on, even if I can admit that I felt the film looked great and there was a lot about how it was made that I think was really solid. And if I had to jump to what my biggest positive for when this movie would be, without a doubt, is Jude Law as Hook. I think that he was kind of robbed of being in a better film, unfortunately, as I feel like he's the character that they developed the most in this movie. Wendy is kind of the main character here in this movie, played by Ever Anderson, who is the daughter of Mila Jovovich, as well as Paul W.S. Anderson. And, I thought her performance here was pretty solid. I enjoyed her as our lead, but I don't really think she was given an abundance to do in the script, and I don't really think most of our young actors are really given an abundance to do in the script. I would say that's across the board, but since the young kids are the main leads, I don't really ever feel like they're given much emotionally for us to really grip onto. And then when it comes to Jude Law as Hook, he's the one character that does get that character development as we dive deeper into his past and his backstory with Peter Pan and his time in Neverland and how he became the man he is. Now, we've seen sympathetic versions of Hook in the past, but I do think that Jude Law brought something different, and there was some whimsy when it came to his iteration of Hook on screen. Unfortunately, a lot of the writing around him and the other characters that are in these sequences with him often never really elevated anything beyond it just being what we already know it to be, and often just had me thinking, why does this iteration of the story exist at all? And while Jude Law for me was the absolute best part of this film, unfortunately, one of the title characters was one of my least favorite parts of the film, and that is Alexander Molony as Peter Pan himself. I wasn't a fan of this kid as Peter Pan, and I want to try to not be too harsh of kid actors here on the channel, because this is a young kid who got the chance to be in a Disney film, about Peter Pan, one of the most iconic characters. Whatever he does in his life, this will always be something that he did that he can look back on. And so, I'm the 30-year-old guy here who's never been in a film, who's just talking about the movie. So I recognize that this is a kid. But unfortunately, his performance was just stale and dry and stiff, and I never really felt the whimsy and the magical, kind of flamboyant nature of the character of Peter Pan. There wasn't really much to his character that ever had the charisma or charm that we've seen in iteration after iteration. And when it came to this version of Peter Pan, I never bought into him. Every line that he delivered for me just felt just super stiff. I feel like they needed to have just casted a different actor, unfortunately, and this kid for me just never really brought it. There was nothing about anything that he did in this film that ever captured me at all. There was not a single sequence with Peter Pan in this movie that I ever bought into, just because I just never bought into this kid's performance, unfortunately. And a lot of the characters that we all know and love in this film, like Tiger Lily and the Lost Boys, or even Wendy's two brothers, they never really have much to do in this film, and often just feel like caricatures where you know who those characters are. Maybe they've said their name, like Tiger Lily or the two brothers, the one with the top hat and the one with the, with the little bear, but there is never really much given to them in the story to ever really do other than just kind of being present. And unfortunately, it just kind of made most of the side characters feel just kind of there and not really all that important. And by the time we got to the end of the runtime, I just found myself just kind of feeling, again, like I mentioned earlier, the film looks great. It is well acted for the most part outside of Alexander Molony, in my opinion. I think Jude Law is a really great Captain Hook, but I don't think the writing around any of the good elements of this film really ever saved it. There isn't much about this that's ultimately memorable, and when it comes to the Disney live action remakes, it's definitely on the lower part of the totem pole. I would say that I kind of liked it nearly as much as I did the Pinocchio film from last year, which also I was not a huge fan of. And when it comes down to it, this was just a mediocre film for me that had some really solid elements. And one other thing I definitely want to mention is Tinkerbell in this film, who this time around is played by Yara Shahidi, who's played by a black actress. And I saw a lot of discourse about this online. Of course, people are going to get upset when there's any sort of race swapping. And for me, I never really mind anything like that. I'm always open to a different iteration of the character. I thought she was fine in the film. Tinkerbell also, like a lot of the other characters, outside of some key moments, isn't really given an abundance to do. She looked good in the role, you know, she definitely felt like Tinkerbell to an extent, but at the same time she didn't, simply because, like I mentioned before, Tinkerbell has had spin-off movies that have established a whole Tinkerbell universe in a way, with all the other fairies, Tinkerbell's friends, and there is a black Tinkerbell fairy friend known as Iridessa, who, as soon as I saw the character and throughout the course of the film, I just kept thinking of that character. So it just kind of kept me thinking throughout, why not just have the classic looking Tinkerbell in the film and have this iteration of the Peter Pan story, maybe have some of those other established Tinkerbell fairy friends join us in the movie like Iridessa. I feel like that could have made for something a little bit different, and I feel like it could have, you know, given some of these other characters that have been established in other stories the time to shine in live action. Whereas for me, it was kind of distracting that we had this race swap in the movie, because it just kept making me think of the other character that already exists. But that last part is honestly a minor gripe when it comes down to this film, because I would have been completely fine with any and all of that if this film honestly was just stronger when it came to the writing and the emotion and the characters. But ultimately just feels like a, hey, you know the Peter Pan story, we're going to show you those moments in this movie, but there isn't going to be a whole lot of character development for most of these characters, and there isn't going to be an abundance in this movie that ever makes you think, wow, this is a new rendition of Peter Pan that I cannot wait to revisit. There are tons of Peter Pan films that are in live action or in animation, Disney or not Disney, that I would probably go and watch way before I rewatch this one, which is a damn shame. And I hope moving forward with some of these Disney Plus, straight to Disney Plus live action remakes, that they do something a little bit different with these movies, that they give them a little bit more, that they do something to kind of make it feel like it's worth rewatching. You know, part of the joy and the wonder of a lot of these classics that they're remaking is the fact that a lot of us have revisited the movies over and over again, and I want to feel that again with some of these live action remakes. There are some live action remakes that I have revisited, like The Jungle Book, on many of occasions, even something like the first Maleficent movie. I like these different reimaginings in live action. I just think that they need to have something that gives them their own identity and something that gives them an exciting kind of rewatchability, and often with some of the more recent ones they haven't really been doing that. And I was also not super surprised after looking into the film as to why I didn't love it, because David Lowery also directed one of the other live action remakes that they've done years ago for Pete's Dragon, which was at the time my least favorite of the Disney live action remakes. So I guess I'm not surprised I didn't like this one all that much too. And those are my thoughts on the new Peter Pan and Wendy film. I just don't know that it's a movie that I can just sit here and say, yeah, I recommend you go and rush and watch it. It's a movie that exists. It's a movie that, you know, you can watch, but I don't know that it's one that is all that necessary to watch. I don't know that it's one that's all that exciting to watch. I don't know that it's one that's gonna really capture your attention the entire time. I don't know that this is gonna be one that's gonna be remembered 10 years from now, but I'm sure there'll be some young kids that this is their first Peter Pan movie that'll remember this decades from now. But unfortunately for me, this was just a run-of-the-mill film overall, and just a run-of-the-mill Peter Pan film. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. Definitely leave your comments down below. Did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? Where does this rank for you when it comes to other Peter Pan films? Definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Again, hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.